Hello, Nintendo Wii here. Today I'll be talking about the Philips CDI and taking a look at some of the games I got with the system. So you might be wondering why I have a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation here. Well, you probably know originally that the PlayStation was going to be an add-on for the SNES. And there's still relics of that if you look at the back of the system. If you look at the back of the system, you can actually see it's got this EXT slot here, and that's where the PlayStation would have gone. So you would peel that back, and like how the Game Boy player slots onto the GameCube, you'd actually put the PlayStation attachment onto the bottom of the SNES. As we all know, that fell through, and Sony went on to make their own system, the PlayStation. And around the same time that Nintendo and Sony were collaborating on that, Philips were also coming up with their own ideas on how to use CDs. As they were the original company that founded the CD technology, the CD-ROM technology, they came up with this system here, called the Philips CDI, which is absolutely huge and heavy, but it was more like an all-in-one multimedia kind of system, rather than just a games console. It wasn't until a few years after that it was actually rebranded, kind of marketed as a games console, instead of just an all-in-one TV device. That also explains why the controller looks like a TV remote rather than a game controller. There was an actual game controller that resembles a SNES pad, but it's so hard to find these days I just couldn't get one, so I had to make do with this horrible analog stick. As you saw, if you saw my video about The Apprentice, how awkward it is to control with this. It's a nightmare. Trying to control this with a stupid analog stick that spins round. So that was a very brief history about the system. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure there's a million other videos that can talk about this far better than I can. So I'm going to leave it up to them to actually explain the details of it. But I just want to take a look at some of the games that I got with this system. I'd like to thank my friend at Mplay. You can find him on YouTube at Mplay or EMplay. He does some Let's Plays and stuff. He was kind enough to give me this system for a really good price, and I got a whole range of games for it, so I'll just go through a few of them now. So as you can see, I've separated this up into 3 different piles. The first pile here is demo discs, and also a few... also, there was a few discs that have actually been burnt onto CD that I could play, including Link, The Faces of Evil, Zelda, Wand of Gamelon.
I just wonder what Ganon's up to. Your Majesty, Ganon and his minions have seized the island of Korodai.
How can we help?
It is written, only Link can defeat Ganon.
Great! I'll grab my stuff!
Zelda's Adventure, Lemmings, which I haven't tried yet, and Hotel Mario.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti!
And all of these games I would like to own the actual physical boxes and discs for eventually, but it's just good to be able to play them and just see what sort of ideas they had for the system, even though it never really took off. It's just really interesting that there are actually Nintendo games on a system that isn't made by Nintendo. It's so weird to play this. But to be honest, Hotel Mario isn't that bad. Can't really say the same about the Zelda games, unfortunately. I'll start with the worst and then move on to the best. So here's some of the kind of iffy games that I got with it. There was Battleships, which, as you would expect, is literally just battleships. Not very exciting. Then there is International Tennis Open. For some reason it's open. The same with this golf game below it. But if I do open this, you can see that it opens very strangely. It actually opens upwards instead of sideways like a normal CD case. So it actually lifts up like that. And they're all broken for whatever reason. And inside they just come on CDs. This tennis game is actually pretty interesting. It actually uses digitized characters, kind of like Mortal Kombat or something, but as it's on the CD, the quality's a lot better. So I was actually quite impressed by this game, considering it's just a tennis game.
He really put that one away.
Next is golf, which is also kind of weird and actually uses a lot of real video in the gameplay, which is very, very strange, but it's okay if you like golf. This next game, if you can even call it a game, is not okay. This is by far the worst game that I've played on the system so far. This is called Mystic Midway, and it's basically just a shooting gallery and with this really crazy presenter, but literally I completed the entire game in a few minutes, and the credits were actually longer than the game, and then when the credits finish, it doesn't take you back to the title screen, it actually turns the game off completely and sends you back to the main menu of the system. So I really don't understand what they were trying to do with this game, and apparently it does have a sequel, so I'm extremely worried for anyone who's had the misfortune of playing that.
That's right. You'll never get out of here. Oh, but hey, I don't make the rules, you know. If it was up to me, I'd make your head into a target.
Terrible, terrible game. A game that seems interesting, but I really couldn't get into it because for some reason, even though I clicked English, the game came up in French, and I couldn't be bothered to try again. It's called Kether. It's supposed to be some sort of sci-fi space adventure game with like FMV cutscenes and some weird puzzles in between. It could be interesting if you can get into it, but obviously those kind of games these days are extremely dated. But I can't believe just how cheesy and cheap and just 90s this game sounds. Let me just read you a bit from the back of the box. You are Mekhor, Galactic Knight of Light. You have chosen to save the Princess of Wisdom from the evil forces of Khorne, Master of Darkness. Your perilous journey through the galaxy of Kether will put you under fearsome attack. Enoi, Emperor of Light, will guide you as you fight the powerful laser artillery of Hod, battle the killer vessels of Gerbura, and defeat the Dark Knights of the Temple. And it's available in English and French. Crazy, crazy game. The next game, a little less crazy, is Pinball. And it is what it says, it's just pinball. It's got a few interesting boards, and they all have, for some reason, completely different graphic styles. But the thing that really annoyed me about this game is the fact that the ball moves far too fast to keep up with.
Sunshine here today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70. It's currently 75 degrees.
And the last of these games I've got here is CD Shoot. This is basically just a shooting game where you just move the cursor around, click on a certain area, and it will shoot whatever was in that space. But that's about it, really. Now let's move on to some more interesting games. First up, I was really pleased to get these. That is the original Dragon's Lair games and Space Ace, the third game in the Don Bluth series. So I'm sure you all know what Dragon's Lair is. It was the first arcade game to use Laserdisc and actually include like proper animated graphics. The gameplay suffers horrendously because of that. There's no actual gameplay as such. You basically just have to press the right direction or the right button at the right point in time in the cartoon. And I tried playing through Dragon's Lair 1. It's just impossible to play these days. It's so difficult to know when you're supposed to press a button. I think Dragon Lairs 2 improves on that a little bit, because at least the screen flashes. And I haven't played Space Ace yet, but I'll have a go after and put some footage in this video to show you. So I'm really happy to have these, and it's a nice bit of history. The next game is one that didn't come with the system. This is one I actually bought off eBay a few weeks after. After looking it up online, this is possibly one of the best games for the system. It's called Burn Cycle. And I did actually have a lot of fun playing this. It's another FMV game, as you'd expect from these early CD systems. This one has you moving around some very futuristic environment as this guy who's got a bomb in his head, and you only have 2 hours to complete the game, else the bomb will explode. Got a nice special edition with this. Unfortunately, just like all the other games, the case is broken.
I tried to think, but my thoughts raced around with nowhere to go. It was like someone had put a shotgun upside my head and blown a hole clear through my brain.
Connor, talk to me, goddammit. Where are you?
I'm okay. The data must have packaged it all. I got a sudden shock rush.
You've been made. Just get out of there and fast.
And last but not least, for the actual games at least, this is The Apprentice, a game that I played a while ago at a gaming convention in Manchester, I think, or maybe Leeds, but somewhere like that. Anyway, I played this, and finally I own my own copy of it. I did a Retro Gamer Week video of it a few weeks ago, so I'll put a link in the description and you can go and watch that. It's a really fun game and easily the best game that I've played on this system so far, but to be honest that's not saying much. So that was a look at all the games. I'll quickly go through what else I got, but there's nothing too exciting. There was an encyclopedia, something about Andrew Lloyd Webber. There's CDI games, highlights and previews. There does seem to be some interesting games for the system, mostly FMV games, but that's what you'd expect. A Philips demo disc, and an audio-visual Philips disc from 1992 and 3, which is just hilarious to watch. They're just basically announcing all the latest products, but in this really weird Egyptian setting, which is very strange.
Welcome to the main menu of this CDI. You can find lots of information here about many new Philips products. The products are arranged in groups. Move the cursor to a hot spot and click. If you would like information about Matchline products, for example, then you should move the cursor to Matchline and click.
And it's so funny to see all these really, by today's standards, ancient technologies, and they're talking about them like it's the most amazing thing in the world, which is kind of funny.
TVs featuring IDTV 100Hz improved definition TV technology with digital scan for a more stable picture, which is more relaxing for your eyes. With Blackline S-Tube technology for an even more natural, lifelike picture with 30% more contrast and color brilliance than conventional black tubes.
There's also a few more demo discs. There's something that looks like it must have come in a magazine or something that's about the war. Don't really know what that is. And a few actual movies which were on CD. I have Top Gun and The Crying Game. And the quality on them isn't actually too bad, so basically this was just like a really early DVD player with gaming capabilities, more than an actual game console. But for the time, it must have been really impressive. Unfortunately, it didn't sell very well, and Philips clearly didn't get their marketing right with this system, and it never really took off. But I'm really glad to own one. It's a nice piece of history to have, and I hope you guys had fun looking at the system along with me. I hope I taught you something today. That's it. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to Nintendo Wii. Goodbye.